And welcome to another video here at Blue Duck Fantasy Football. Today we're going to be going over a rookie draft that Matt and I did for a team that we share on the Reality Sports online platform. If you're not familiar with that platform, it's all about contracts. So there's a free agent auction every year, and there's a rookie draft. And the rookie draft is 4-year contracts. This is 12 team. It's half PPR. And depending on where you pick a player, that's how much his salary is going to be. So 1.01 is going to be the highest salary. There is a big drop off after the first round. When you get to the second round, the players go a lot cheaper, and then they go cheaper again in the third and fourth. But once you get out of the first round, the salaries are pretty negligible. So you're getting any type of player in the second round, you're getting yourself some type of a steal if he's going to be good. So we're just going to go over our team and kind of like what our strategy is for this as we get into this draft. So at quarterback, we have Lamar Jackson. You can see his contract. He's got 2 years left, so he was somebody that we drafted in the second round a couple of years ago. Really paid off last year, and we got him for another 2 years at a very low cost. Next up at running back, we have Josh Jacobs. He was the 1.01 last year. Not quite sure how we ended up with 1.01, but we also ended up with 1.02, and with 1.02, we took David Montgomery. So you can see the contracts there. Fairly similar, 1.01, 1.02. About a $500,000 difference. And our third running back on the team, we do start two, is SONY MICHEL, who was a top 5 pick, I believe, a couple years ago. So he's got 2 years left. Injuries have really kind of damaged him, and he's not quite the player that he looked like coming out of college, but still has a good depth role on this team. Moving on to wide receivers, we have Jarvis Landry, and he's somebody we got at auction on a 3-year deal. You can see this is where we're starting to spend some money on some players. 28.5 this year, 30.2 next year, and he is one of our starting receivers. Another one of our starting receivers, Davante Adams, that we got for a steal on a 4-year contract a while back. As you can see, only $9.4 million this season, and that's it. After that, he's off the team. We can franchise him, but we'll see what happens. Deebo Samuel, a second-round pick from last year. As you can see, his contract very similar to Lamar Jackson's, and you can see the drop-off from the first round to the second round when you compare his contract to Michel, Montgomery, and Josh Jacobs. So, going to be injured to start the season. Probably miss a couple games, but good wide receiver to have on the team. At tight end, Travis Kelce, another player we picked up at auction last year on this contract here at $21.6 million. And to back him up, we have somebody we drafted last year, Irv Smith Jr. That's a second-round tender on that contract as well. So, going into this draft, we have pick number 1.08. Hopefully we can get a running back there, because we do like to draft running backs and buy wide receivers at auction. We also have 2.07, 3.07, and 4.03. But we do have an offer on the table to move back from 1.08 to 2.02 and get a first next year in exchange for 1.08 and our third round pick, which is 3.07. So depending on who's there in this draft, we'll see what happens. And we may move back or we may pick. Again, we'd rather get a running back, but there's a good chance we won't have one, and we're not going to reach for a player. We'd happily move back 5 spots and take another first rounder next year, because you never know where that's going to be. So let's get right into the draft here. 1.01, it is Jonathan Taylor, running back for the Colts. 4-year contract. Jonathan Taylor, pretty standard. It's either him or Clyde Edwards-Helaire that usually goes at the 1.01. And at the 1.02, it's Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who got a huge boost recently as Damien Williams has opted out of the 2020 season. So Clyde Edwards-Helaire has gone from being a second-round reach to a possible first-round pick. Again, I'm not overly confident that he's going to be that good this year. I do see them going after possibly Devonta Freeman, but his value has gone up, no question about that. At number 3, a bit of a surprise here as the wide receiver jumps into this mix of running backs, and CeeDee Lamb, wide receiver out of Dallas, goes 1.03. At 1.04, we have DeAndre Swift, running back out of Detroit. So at this point, I'm liking a chance that we might be able to get J.K. Dobbins, who is my highest rated player in this draft. And at 1.05, it is Cam Akers who goes. Not a player that I care much for. I think he's a decent back, but I think he's in a bad situation with a bad offensive line. And so now I'm holding out hope. We have to dodge 2 bullets. Unlikely. And 1.06, it is J.K. Dobbins. So there are no longer any running backs here. We're not going to reach for KESHAWN Vaughn at 1.08. So the decision to trade out of 1.08 is basically done. As mentioned, the offer was on the table to get a 2021 first and 2.02 for 1.08 and 3.07. So we do that. And 1.07, JEUDY, second wide receiver off the board. And at 1.08, the person who traded with us takes Justin Jefferson, wide receiver out of Minnesota. And at 1.09, the first real reach of the draft here, it's Joe Burrow, quarterback for Cincinnati. And the owner admits that it's a reach, but states that he didn't have a second-round pick and didn't expect him to make it to his pick anywhere in the third round. And he's probably right. So in that situation, though, you should be trading back. You just saw that we were able to trade back and what we got for it. So why couldn't you have done the same? This is just bad fantasy football. So if you're that owner, don't reach, trade back. Especially when this is a draft that has 2 top-end quarterbacks. And now you're paying a whole bunch more. As we mentioned, the contracts take a huge drop-off after round 1. So if you get them at 2.01, even trading 1.09 for 2.01 straight up, you save money. But obviously you wouldn't do that. You would get something else with it. So don't be like that owner and trade back. Get yourself the most value for your pick. 1.10, Jalen Reagor, who with the opt-out of Marquise Goodwin, his value is going up as well. 1.11, T. Higgins, wide receiver out of Cincinnati. It is a bit surprising to see him go this early, especially in a 4-year contract lead. But again, if he goes at the 2.01, he's going to be cheaper. So it's $4 million at this spot. And that's $4 million that isn't really going to do much in 2020. If you had gotten them at 2.01, it would have been about half that salary. Henry Ruggs goes at 1.12, wide receiver out of Las Vegas. And that ends the first round. First pick in round 2, 2.01 is KESHAWN Vaughn, running back out of Tampa Bay. Decent pick here, the next running back that should go. But it leaves one of my favorite players in this year's draft, who I happen to get in, well, almost all of these rookie drafts, and that's DENZEL MIMS, wide receiver for the Jets. Easy pick. No need to trade out of this one. 2.03, Michael Pittman, wide receiver from Indianapolis. Good pick, especially on a 4-year contract. Should really develop into a good player. Antonio Gibson, the running back out of Washington, goes at 2.04. A lot of upside there, a lot of downside as well. This is like a high-risk, high-reward pick. 2.05, Brandon AIYUK. This is not a player that I care for because of the landing spot. Great with the ball in his hands, and with the injury to Debo, might be able to get some more reps early. But this is really a run-first team, and his role isn't going to be that big at any point as long as Debo is there. Debo will be there for another 3 years. So a ceiling of a wide receiver, like a top 25, that's the ceiling. So not overly high. 2.06, Tua Tagovailoa, quarterback out of Miami. It's a good spot to take a quarterback. It's going to cost this person around $1.5 million to $2 million for 4 years of Tua. So if Tua's as good as people expected him to be, he is going to be a bargain at that. As you saw with us having Lamar Jackson, it is a huge bargain at quarterback. And this is where somebody like Joe Burrow should have went for this type of money. Anywhere in the second round, I'd be fine with Joe Burrow if you want to take a quarterback. 2.07, this is back to us. We take Bryan Edwards, a top 5 wide receiver and a top 10 overall player for me in this year's draft class. We could have looked at running back, but we're not looking to force any position, especially since I have faith that SONY and Montgomery will have a bit of bounce-back seasons here, especially Montgomery. I think they're going to really try to push to get him involved. So no need to force a running back here that, what's going to be the upside? Zach Moss would be the best one. A.J. Dillon isn't going to see any time this year. Darrynton Evans would need an injury. in order to have value. So Moss would have been the one running back to look at if we were looking to force a running back pick. 2.08, Laviska Shenault, wide receiver to Jacksonville. That's a crowded wide receiver room. It always is there. They still have Chris Conley. They still have D.D. Westbrook. So at what point does Shenault get on the field? Shall see. 2.09, Zach Moss. Just talked him up. Decent pick here. Like Zach Moss's talent, the injury risk, that's the issue with it. And the fact that he went to Buffalo with Singletary. But I think they will probably try to get Zach Moss more involved if he can stay healthy. 210, A.J. Dillon, running back out of Green Bay. Again, not somebody who's going to do much this year, but this is a 4-year rookie contract as opposed to other leagues that we have where it's 3-year rookie contract. So the pick makes more sense here. 2.11, Darrynton Evans. The running backs are starting to go off the board here. People grabbing some running back depth because there's not really anybody else that they like at any positions. 2.12, Anthony McFarland, half PPR, so definitely some upside there. In a standard league, not really where you'd want to take Anthony McFarland, but because this is half PPR and this is the end of the second round, it's an absolutely fine pick. And we go to the third round, and the first pick is another Steeler. 3.01, we have Chase Claypool. If he moves to tight end, I think is going to be a steal of a pick. But at wide receiver, I mean, they got so many guys there that he's going to have to compete with. 3.02, Joshua Kelly. Good landing spot because Eckler obviously can't handle the full workload, but he has Justin Jackson in front of him, and we'll see if we can beat him out. I wasn't overly impressed by Joshua Kelly's tape, but I wasn't overly impressed by Justin Jackson's either. So 3.03, Antonio Gandy-Golden, and very high upside wide receiver pick in Washington where they really don't have much depth. They have Kelvin Harmon, who's now out for the season with the ACL, so there's a possibility he's the number 2 guy this year. Is that enough to be fantasy relevant? Probably not in Washington for the Washington football team. 3.04, Van Jefferson, wide receiver who's going to take some time to get into the starting lineup. 3.05, LaMichael Pirine, running back out of the New York Jets. It's a nice player who could have value as early as next year, unless, of course, they're able to trade Le'Veon Bell this year, which I doubt they will. They'll probably run him as much as they can and then give the offense over to Pirine next year. Devin Duvernay at 3.06 is a very good value pick. He's a guy who could have some high reception numbers if they use him in the offense the way I think they're going to use him, as kind of like the short yardage guy opposite Mark Andrews. So have him on one side, Andrews on the other, and just some quick outs for Lamar Jackson. Doesn't see anything, he can scramble and then maybe throw deep to Marquise Brown as well. Eno Benjamin, so this was going to be our pick. Do like Eno, and this is probably who we would have picked here at 3.07 had we not traded that pick in order to get another first for next year. By the way, we do have 3 first-round picks next year, so quite excited about that, especially how deep the draft's going to be. 3.08, Justin Herbert. Why not take a flyer on the quarterback at this point? These contracts, like I said, are about $1 million at this point. KJ Hamler goes at 3.09, the wide receiver out of Denver. Speed guy who may just be the odd man out, though. 3.10, Quintus Cephas, the wide receiver in Detroit. With Marvin Jones getting up there in age, that's kind of an opening there to see who was going to be the guy in future years. So, decent pick. 3.11, Lynn Bowden Jr. Don't really understand this pick. 3.12, DJ Dallas. Nice depth running back. 4.01, KJ Hill, wide receiver for the Chargers. 4.02, Donovan Peoples-Jones, wide receiver out of Cleveland. This is a nice pick here in a 4-year contract, as he has a lot of upside. Not going to do anything this year. Might not do anything next year, but you're paying him less than $1 million in the league to have him on the team. So you can give him 2 years, and then if he develops into something, you have such a bargain in your lineup that you can really spend money on somebody else. It's back to us, and this is going to be our last pick of the draft. 4.03, it's Cole Kmet, tight end at Chicago. So with 2 wide receivers picked already, and all of the running backs that I had any interest in already gone, no need for a quarterback at this point. We go with tight end to kind of solidify our position behind Travis Kelce, and we're really just looking for best player available here. We went back and forth between Troutman and Kmet, and in the end we went with the younger, higher upside player who will likely take longer to develop, but we don't need him this year. And if we end up franchising Travis Kelce, then we won't need him next year as well. 4.04, Tyler Johnson, wide receiver out of Tampa Bay. So had we not already taken 2 wide receivers, this would have been a strong candidate to get picked. Similar to Donovan Peoples-Jones, he's in a situation where he's not going to see the field this year, possibly not next year. But at this cost, you give them 2 years, and if they're not doing anything by the 3rd year, you kick them off the team. 4.05, Gabriel Davis. Another player I like. He's in that Donovan Peoples-Jones range to me, so good pick. A little bit of a quick run on tight ends here goes with Devin Asiasi, tight end out of New England, going ahead of Troutman, which is surprising. Jordan Love, quarterback out of Green Bay. This is a person who could have fit our team, but really not quantifying, like having a backup quarterback that's not going to be an actual backup quarterback on the roster, just waiting for the Lamar Jackson contract to expire and then getting him 2 years for cheap. Because somebody can get impatient and just end up dropping him. So Jordan Love, 4.07. 4.08, there goes Troutman. Good pick there. 4.09, Jalen Hurts. This is the better pick to me. Because if he gets on the field at this point, this season, next season, he's going to have that running upside, which is the reason we went after Lamar Jackson, is because he has that running upside. You can get in the same draft, right? There's Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold, Josh Allen, who developed, had the legs, but really showed at the NFL level what he can do with them. But you take a guy who can run right away, and you're going to get that production a lot quicker in most cases. Darnold's still not producing. Could he this year? Baker had a, not ideal year last year. So other than Allen, who uses his legs, and Lamar, who uses his legs, the other two aren't really in the quarterback you want starting on your team range. So that's why with these 4-year contracts or 3-year contracts, you want someone who, if they get in the lineup, they're going to be an immediate impact fantasy stud. So get yourself a quarterback that has legs. 4.10, Quez Watkins, wide receiver out of Philly. And 4.11, Albert O, tight end out of Denver. And somebody decided to take a kicker at 4.12, so we don't even discuss that. So we started with 4 picks, 1 in each round. Ended up picking 3 times with no first rounder, but 2 second rounders. And I will admit that in these drafts, I've been a little blinded by my rankings and not focusing on needs. As I mentioned, Bryan Edwards is more of a luxury pick, and as Zach Moss, even with the injury history, may have been a better decision at 2.07, especially with no third-round pick to get a guy like Eno Benjamin. But having said that, as I mentioned earlier, I'm not worried about the running back situation. And if need be, a trade could be made to acquire running back, and we can happily trade Edwards for him when he shows how good he is. So quite happy with our picks. 3 first-round picks next year to go along with the players we already have. But that's it.